We're going to dive into chapter 8 of The Way of the Bodhisattva. Shantideva here is starting to talk to us about meditation, and he's going to spend a couple chapters talking about that. Starting with the importance of solitude and then talking some about various obstructions and how to deal with them. I want to start, as I've started other times, I want to just read the text and see if anybody has any immediate reactions to that. I want to start with, I'm going to read verse 1 through 28 to start with. Cultivating diligence, as just described, in concentration, I will place my mind for those whose mind are slack and wandering are caught between the fangs of affliction. In solitude, the mind and body are not troubled by distraction. Therefore, leave this worldly life and totally abandon mental wandering. Because of loved ones and desire for gain, we fail to turn away from worldly things. These, then, are the first things to renounce. The prudent should conduct themselves like this. Penetrative insight joined with calm abiding utterly eradicates afflictive states. Knowing this, first search for calm abiding, found by people who are happy to be free from worldly ties. Beings, brief, ephemeral, who strongly cling to what is also transient, will catch no glimpse of those they love for many thousands of their future lives. Not seeing them, their mind will have no joy. They therefore will not rest in equanimity. But even if they see them, they are not content, and as before, the pain of longing stays. If I crave for other beings, a veil is cast upon the perfect truth. Wholesome disillusion melts away, and finally there comes the sting of pain. My thoughts are all for them, and thus my life is frittered by. My family and friends all change and pass, for whom the changeless Dharma is cast out. For if I act like childish beings, sure it is that I shall fall to evil destinies. Those who do I keep company with, so why do I keep company with infants who lead me to a state so far from virtue? One moment friends, the next their bitter enemies. Even pleasant things arouse their discontent. Ordinary people, it is hard to please them. A beneficial word and they resent it, turning me instead from what is good. And when I close my ears to what they say, their anger makes them fall to lower states. Jealous of superiors, they vie with equals. Proud to those below, they strut when praised. Say something untoward, they seethe with rage. What good was ever had from childish folk? Keep company with them, and what will follow? Self-aggrandizement and scorn for others. Talk about the good things of samsara. Every kind of vice is sure to come. Only ruin can result. From such a link between myself and others, for they will bring no benefit to me, and I in turn can do them nothing good. Therefore, flee the company of childish people. Greet them when you meet with smiles that keep on terms of common courtesy without inviting intimate relations. Like bees that get their honey from the flowers, take only what will serve the practice of the Dharma. Treat everyone like new acquaintances and keep yourself from close familiarity. Oh, I am rich and well respected. Lots of people take delight in me. Nourish such complacency, and later, after death, your fears will start. Indeed, O foolish and afflicted mind, you want and crave for all and everything. All this together will rise up as pain instead, increased 1,000-fold. Since this is so, the wise have no attachments. From such cravings, fear and anguish come. And fix this firmly in your understanding. All that may be wished for will by nature fade to nothing. For people may have gained great wealth and riches, enjoying reputation, sweet renown, but who can say where they have gone to now, with all the baggage of their gold and fame? Why should I be pleased when people praise me? Others there will be who scorn and criticize. And why despondent when I'm blamed, since there'll be others who think well of me? So many are the leanings and the wants of beings that even Buddha could not please them all. Of such a wretch as me, no need to speak. I'll give up such concerns with worldly things. People scorn the poor who have no wealth. They also criticize the rich who have it. What pleasure can derive from keeping company with people such as these, so difficult to please? In kindness, childish beings take no delight unless their own desires are satisfied. A childish person, thus, is no true friend. This is the Tathagata. This the Tathagatas have declared. In woodlands, haunt of stag and bird, among the trees where no dissension jars, it's there I would keep pleasant company. When might I be off to make my dwelling there? When shall I depart to make my home in cave or empty shrine or under spreading tree? Within my breast, a free, unfettered heart, which never turns to cast a backward glance. When might I abide in such a place unclaimed and ownerless, that wide and unconfined a place where I might stay at liberty without attachment? When might I be free of fear, without the need to hide from anyone, with just a begging bowl and few belongings, dressed in garments coveted by none? So that's the first section that I want to talk about here. First, any thoughts? Anybody struck by anything we've read so far?
I have a little difficulty with this passage in that it seems to point towards retreating from normal life, or at least retreating from certain relationships. And I know Shantideva was a monk, probably in a monastery, so he was probably well acquainted with that lifestyle, but it seems quite foreign to me, what he's suggesting.
Yeah, I think this is one of the things that we often see in the early writings, especially where one of the goals might be to be just that monk. In China, to be the monks who went off into the mountains to solitude. But what he is raising here are a number of important issues even for us. And I share some of your, as I read that, I certainly feel some of what you're saying. It certainly, much of it doesn't seem to apply um, to our current circumstance of being lay practitioners in this world that we live in. But let me talk about what he does say, and let's come back to that. Anything else? Okay. So let's take a look at some of what the commentaries say and some of my thoughts here. In chapter 8, he begins talking about meditation as the next paramita to be taken up. Pema talks about the fact that he again presents these in a linear way as before, as a way of organizing them. But of course, this isn't how our spiritual path goes. It isn't a straight line from one paramita to the next. But on the other hand, she reminds us that when we maintain a strong intention, we gradually become more and more present and less distracted, more compassionate and less self-centered. Shantideva begins telling us reasons to tame the mind and avoid distractions, and that failure to do so leads only to pain. The first thing he talks about is the importance of solitude, the need to find time to be free from distraction, removing ourselves, if you will, from this worldly life. He is telling us that outer solitude is necessary to develop inner solitude. And I think that addresses in a different way, John, some of what you were saying. He's saying we have to find that time for outer solitude. And we still have to do that, even living as we do today. I'm sorry, I lost my. Okay. The first thing he talks about, I'm sorry, I lost my place here. Periods of solitude, sitting quietly with ourselves, allows our mind to settle down. He tells us that our tendency to seek happiness in externals, our partners, food, possessions, it is not that we need to reject these things, but rather that we need to see our unrealistic expectations of them. A quiet, steady mind is necessary if we are to be able to look at our internal workings, our desires, habits, and tendencies. Because we're ephemeral beings, when we cling to things that are equally impermanent, it is a setup for dissatisfaction. Though they may bring us short-term gratification and contentment, they cannot bring lasting joy or satisfy our desires for long-term happiness. He tells us that our cravings for the impermanent cast a veil upon the perfect truth. He tells us that our cravings blind us to the unbiased nature of mind and to our own disillusion with samsara. He says that we can fritter away whole lifetimes with objects of our desire and disdain, even though they all fade and pass away, further strengthening our habit of clinging. When we're jealous of the positions or attributes of others, competitive with other peers, or feel scorn for those we perceive to be less than us, these are opportunities to practice the Dharma, offering sympathetic joy to a superior, kindness and respect to a peer, or compassion to the person we feel superior to, as well as being able to see into our biases. Solitude is a necessary ingredient for us to be able to develop insight into these patterns. He then talks about relationships. He reminds us not to gossip, boast, or slander, and ask what we consider ask that we consider if a given relationship awakens bodhicitta, and as Shantideva says, is consonant with the Dharma. He then comes back to the importance of solitude and meditation in developing stability of mind. I think this is another place where he gives a teaching. Certainly later in part of the teaching, it sounds as if he's saying, not to take on any significant relationships. And I don't think that's the message he has here. I think what he's saying is just that we need to make sure that the relationships we take on are helping us to move in the direction of stability and the Dharma, what we know of it. He compares that stability at one point to a candle flame and solitude to a chimney we put over the flame to shelter it from blowing out in the wind of samsara and distraction. Solitude and meditation can give us the strength to work with difficult situations. Pema encourages us to engage in daily meditation practice for 10 to 20 minutes, and if possible, to engage in day-long or week-long retreats or longer if possible. These bring us the inner steadiness and calm necessary to deal with difficult situations. We need to recognize, too, that good things can, at least at times, be harder to work with than the bad ones. Our suffering of different kinds can remind us to look inward, to find patience, or put us in touch with the pain, with our own pain, and thus the pain of others. When things are going well, our thoughts and feelings can blend smoothly into attachment, and we become infatuated with our achievements and possessions. These positive obstacles are equally illusory, and Shantideva warns us not to let them make us complacent. He reminds us that all the rich and famous people of the past are now gone, and that their fame and riches didn't help them at the time they died, and that it won't help us either. I'll stop there just for a second to ask if there's I know this was a long section, if there's any thoughts or any questions so far before I finish.
Yeah, John.
Yeah.
So when he talks about solitude, I'm just trying to get my mind around that one. Is this solitude during meditation only, or is this leading a solitude life? And I'm wondering what the benefit of that is. And you talked about death. Is that going to help you at the moment of death? That you've been solitude most of your life, or at big parts of your life? Is anything going to help us at death? The answer is no. So that kind of was a moot question. But
the answer is yes. Or no.
So about the solitude thing, though, does he just mean the solitude of meditation, or is he going beyond that with other forms of solitude for some benefit?
I think, and this is personally how I feel about this teaching, I think for all of us, solitude is a skillful means. And I think for each of us, the answer to that may be different. There may, well, as we've seen happen in the past, there may be people for whom going off and living in the mountains by themselves may be the best thing they can do to connect with the Dharma. For other people, certainly that may be action. It may be to take the a really beautiful example, Mother Teresa, and who spent her whole life ministering to the poor, and in spite of that, talked about her dark nights of the soul. I mean, she was challenged too. I think for each of us, that road can be real different, and the amount we need both solitude and action, especially if we're looking at what Dogen said. But the amount of each, my belief is that the amount of each depends on each person's path and looking at and understanding what's going to bring them closest to Dharma ideals. That'd be my thought.
The Dharma being hoping to save all people?
Well, if you will, I'll use another closer to enlightenment, closer to the goal we don't have. How are you living out the Dharma? That's probably the best way I can put it. And what's going to most help you do that? To be present in the moment, acting skillfully, living the paramitas and the precepts. And like I said, I think for some people that may be, I'm sorry I keep going back to Catholic examples, but those are the ones I knew from early on. But Trappist monks who go in and never speak, Thomas Merton, who spent most of his life silent. And yet these folks, and certainly if we read some of the Zen masters that certainly spent much of their life in meditation. So, I mean, that's my answer is that. Any thoughts you want to add to that, Dean?
A few. But I really appreciate remote John, his earlier comment. My response to this chapter is that we're getting thrown at us throughout what you've read thus far, a world of duality.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm actually glad to hear that John found it a little unsettling, because I think it is at odds with the way we practice. So the emphasis on solitude, for instance. Having said that, and even allowing for the fact that he is a monastic, but monastics live together in a community. I mean, if solitude means you go off to a hermitage, and there are a few people that do that, but I don't think that's being held out as some sort of practice ideal. And we also know that you could be in solitude in that way. And he talks about how the accompaniment to solitude is being kind of separate from distractions. And yet in solitude, you could have distractions galore. But also you could be in the midst of a lot of activity and still experience a deep solitude. So the reality where I'm headed with this is that, there's solitude that runs through all things, and there's also community. Even the hermits are in communion with their surroundings. You know, they're going to hear the birds, and they're going to have other interactions. For the most part, you have to interact with other people at some level or another to survive. Even the hermits had to go down to the village to get certain basic tools, like to get tools to do their self-farming and things like that. But you know, we're creating this world of dualities here that's just not reflective of our everyday life. And I think that's what we need to keep in mind. We can extract some benefit from this, but I think if we try to take this as some sort of holy scripture, and I'm not much for apologetics, where you just kind of we find a way to accept the truth being conveyed here. I think where it doesn't mesh up with our understanding, we need to boom. That's a place we should zero in on and look at that a little more deeply. That's why I appreciated John bringing that up. Because solitude, I mean, we come together like for the longer retreats that I think it's Pema Children talked about, and they are important. But you know, there's a difference. This is important to have in mind as we read something like this. We could come together as a sangha and practice a silent retreat, but we're with others. And in what way is that more powerful than if we were just in a cabin somewhere doing that on our own? I'm not denigrating either practice. What I'm saying is we have to be careful when we create these dualities. We seem to be saying that, you know, the solitary practice, getting away from everything, is the preferred vehicle. And I think in our tradition, we don't see things that way. That we find the opportunities, the Dharma gates everywhere. You know, we take vows to that effect, that we're going to recognize those and enter those gates, rather than vowing that I'm going to seek as much solitude as I can this week and put it to good use. Rather, we're saying we're going to practice around the clock. We're not going to say, well, my practice wasn't so good this week because I didn't have any solitude. I'll do better next week. It doesn't matter what this week, how this week unfolds. I'll have plenty of opportunities to practice. You know, a little further on, then it becomes the thing about friends and enemies. And of course, we know the teaching that enemies could be the really valuable openers of Dharma gates, great opportunities to practice. So it's not about picking or choosing one or the other. It's about finding the Dharma everywhere.
Mm-hmm. I think that's what my answer to Joe was meant to be, is it's not one or the other, but we need to use both of these tools. And be aware personally, and I think it is the one thing solitude can do that maybe the other can't, which is it can make us aware of what brings us closest to the right balance of those things, of action and quiet. I mean, yeah.
I feel a lot of my life I have felt that it's like the razor's edge. I feel that I'm on the razor's edge between solitude and giving to others or being involved. And as I have gotten older, and now that I've lost a lot of my hearing, I'm more in the world of solitude than I ever was. And I'm accepting that. At times I think, oh, I've forgotten about this person, or I've forgotten about this person, or I need to go to this meeting, or I need to go to that meeting. And then I think, no, you're just, whatever comes up on your path is what you do. But I think at times it's torturous, and has been for me. And I'm glad we're talking about this, and I'm glad what both John said. It's just different ways of looking at it, and what Dean added on. There's so many ways to be on the path.
Yeah.
We're always.
And I need a lot of help.
Don't we all? Yeah, no, I think that's the best statement of all, is there's probably as many ways to be on the path as there are people on the path. And well, I think this teaching leans at this point to this. It certainly that with, as John said, that it's not particularly helpful to our lifestyle as we experience it. But I think the other thing that I would say about solitude probably is solitude allows us to be with ourselves in a way, and that's whether we're here in community being quiet or whatever, but that quietness allows us to be with ourselves in a way that we can't be, or it's much hard, let me say it a different way, it's much harder to be if you are constantly engaged with other people. That'd be the one other thought I have. So, anything else?
I think that's a good point, but I also think it's the razor's edge. It's sort of like, do I still, Woody Allen said, 99% is just showing up. And I think that led a lot of my life. And sometimes it's hard to give that up and choose your being in solitude instead of showing up for this or that.
Yeah. And actually the comment about being with yourself, you can kind of imagine how Dogen might take something like that, as if self is dropped off, which self are you going to be with? And truly, I mean, to be with yourself signifies that there's, I don't know if there are multiple selves, to be with a particular self. So we have to be careful here. So it's kind of our propensity to introduce, and that's what I see here with Shantideva, is we have these propensities. A practitioner would have these kinds of propensities to praise solitude or being with yourself, but you're with yourself in the sense of the greater self, your true self. You're always with yourself. That's awakening isn't going to be generated by finding that special solitude where you can be with that special self, but rather the awakening that you always are yourself in that greater sense. Mm-hmm. So that's why the Dharma gates are boundless, because you're boundless. So you and the Dharma gates are in sync. Okay. If you understand that you're boundless. But if you don't, then you're going to get caught up in these notions about, oh, I need a special place and my better self that I'm trying to polish up with more solitude and so on and so forth. But to really awaken to your true self, we've got to be able to do that everywhere.
It sounds like Gödel's theory of self-referential things is a loop you get caught in, and there's no end to that one. Like his famous line of "this sentence is false." You can fall into that and never get out of it.
And I think it does ultimately link up with Zen, what he's established, that if we're in the boundless realm, you're in the realm of paradox.
But my first question was about solitude, and that's, I guess, what we haven't defined is how do you use that solitude? So I'm being in solitude. Do I just be with what is? Do I have no thoughts, non-thinking while I'm in solitude? Or do I go about my daily routine? What do I do with solitude? What does it mean?
Yeah, he isn't really defining that.
Yeah, is it a practice?
But we do know what Dogen said, so.
Which is
to study Zen is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self, which is what Dean's alluding to. So, I mean, we come back to that paradigm over and over again, I think.
the self forgetting the self.
And samadhi, I think, helps here in terms of dropping out of self, which samadhi creates the conditions for. Is that kind of solitude, even in the midst of great activity? So I'm thinking the last time we were at the shelter, it was me and Kimberly, and you kind of get locked in practicing samadhi during the busy stretches, just doing that task. So in that sense, I feel like I'm in solitude because there is a samadhi type of state, even though I'm in the middle of all this group of people that we're getting things accomplished to get them fed, but I'm experiencing solitude. So this is the role also of concentration, and that's what this chapter is. Keep in mind, meditation, concentration, samadhi. So just to meditate, I would say, is to be in solitude. Doesn't matter what you're doing, what's going on around you, but if you're really practicing being with each thing that arises, fully immersed in that activity, that's solitude.
Lost in a crowd.
You could put it that way. Except you're not lost. You know exactly where you are. You're engaged in this because there is no you. It's just this activity. So I guess that would be my rejoinder to Shantideva. Is you want solitude? Meditate. I don't care if it's down at Public Square. Meditate. I don't care if you're on an assembly line. Meditate. And you'll experience solitude. No.
Question for what you just said.
Yeah.
It would appear to be that if we are engaged in true total mindfulness, we're in solitude. Is that?
Yeah. So what you discover, you've transcended this dualistic realm. Solitude's no longer in conflict with interacting with others. We get rid of that, what I would term a deluded way of seeing, that we can experience solitude in the midst of. So that sense of paradox, which is always a good sign.
If Thomas Merton had only known that. Could have saved all those years from sitting around in a cabin by himself.
Well, I think he was getting glimpses of that.
Doing some good writing.
Those final years.
I think he enjoyed it.
Yes.
Yeah, until he didn't. Well, sure, and I think we can all appreciate how that type of experience could be really rich. But then we can also recognize that might come a time when maybe a different practice could be called for. Not to become attached, to have that ability to freely move from one practice to another.
I have to share that in the last couple of weeks, I spent a lot of time in our back area behind our condo and trying to set it up so my husband Ed can see the birds because he loves the birds. And I don't know how many bird feeders I have now, but and more hummingbird feeders. But I finally quit being busy and just sat there and enjoyed it. And it's a wonderful thing to just sit and enjoy watching the birds come and go. And I set it up in such a way that he doesn't have to leave his chair in the house or outside to just see all the hummingbirds around him. I have one against the window. That's a special delight. And they come. But I'm not used to sitting still and enjoying it myself. So I started doing that. And that was like, oh, aha, that aha moment.
Yeah.
Somehow that doesn't surprise me. You don't sit still a whole lot. Okay. So the rest of this, actually, I guess there's only one more paragraph. Knowing that there are always people with different opinions, he asks us, why are we happy when praised or upset when condemned? Worldly concerns are the very things that we constantly strive to get or get away from. It is the constant want or don't want that keep us hooked in samsara and in dukkha. Pema tells us that it's crazy to be a slave to these hopes and fears, as we can be sure they will happen. He ends this section reminding us that ultimately outer solitude needs to bring us to inner solitude in order to find lasting happiness. Unless there's any other comments about that section, let's read from verse 29 to 41, which is the next section. And going to the charnel ground, when shall I compare my body with the dry bones there, so soon to fall to nothing, all alike? This form of mine, this very flesh, is soon to give out such a stench that even jackals won't come close, and that indeed is all it will become. This body, now so whole and integral, this flesh and bone that life has knit together, will drift apart, disintegrate. And how much more will friend depart from friend? Alone we're born, alone we come into the world, and when we die, alone we pass away. No one shares our fate, and none our suffering. What need have I for friends who hinder me? Like those who journey on the road, who pause and lodge along the way, beings on the pathway of existence seize upon the lodging of their birth until the time comes round when 4 men carry me away amid the grief of worldly folk. Till then, I will away and go into the forest. There, with no befriending or begrudging, I will stay alone in solitude, considered from the outset as already dead. Thus, when I die, a source of pain to none. Then there will be no one standing by in tears and mourning, thus to trouble me, and no one will be there distracting me from thinking of the Buddha and the practice. Therefore, in these lovely gleaming woods, with joy that's marred by few concerns, where mental wandering will cease, I will remain in blissful solitude, relinquishing all other aspirations, focusing myself on one intent alone. I'll strive to still my mind and calming it to bring it to subjection. In this and in the worlds to come, desire is the parent of all woe. In this world, killing, bonds, and wounds, and in the next, the hells and other pains. You send your go-between, both boy and maid, with many invitations for the prize, avoiding in the quest no sin, no deed that brings an ill renown, nor acts of frightful risk, nor loss and ruin of possessions, all for pleasures and the perfect bliss, that utmost penetrating kiss. So, John, maybe you do need to go to the forest, according to certainly this carries on exactly as you were saying. It sounds like he's headed to the forest all by himself, and certainly not the life that we live, or that most people live at this point. Any thoughts before I start some comments here? Okay.
It seems to run counter to the way of the Bodhisattva and our understanding of the Bodhisattva. This isn't the practice of Avalokiteshvara, the hear of the cries of the world. This is about going somewhere where you won't hear those cries.
But I think also going into the woods, there's such comfort in going into the woods, I find. And I always try and hug a tree and remember that the trees we're interconnected to all the trees. And I think that's really important, to go hug a tree. And that's a different way of taking care of the world.
It certainly does, in fact, neglect the basic idea that we are social creatures. And we are meant to be social creatures. So what Pima says here is that we're now returning to the idea of impermanence. Referring to the charnel ground, Shantideva reminds himself of his own mortality. We depend on our body being relatively healthy, even then, knowing that one day it will disintegrate. We're reminded that we were born alone and that one day we will go through the transition that we call death alone, no matter how much we have loved others or they have loved us, and what we have attained or acquired. Pima suggests that we think of our body as a hotel room, a rest stop on a journey that we stop at for a while before moving on. Shantideva tells us not to waste our time pursuing meaningless distractions and points out our obsessions and the lengths that we will go to satisfy our desires. He tells us that if we have trained in life, death will be joyful and expansive as we connect to the openness of our mind, and that death will be confusing and frightening if we are distracted by the emotional entanglements and if our mind is split. With gentleness, patience, and enthusiasm, we seek the outer and inner solitude to tame and calm the mind, abandoning distractions that disturb it. That's what the commentary says. Any thoughts beyond what we've already talked about here? I think this is more about the same stuff. Okay. My favorite section here. We'll start with 42 to 53. Of what in truth is nothing but a heap of bones, devoid of self, without autonomy? Is this the only object of desire and lust? Sooner pass beyond all suffering and grief. What pains you went to just to lift her face that modestly looked down, which looked upon or not before, was always with a veil concealed. That face for which you languish so, well, here it is, now nakedly exposed. The vultures have uncovered it for you to see. What's this? You run away so soon? That which once you jealously protected, shielded from the eyes of other men? Why, miser that you are, don't you protect it, now that it's the food of graveyard birds? Look, this mass of human flesh is now the fare of carrion beasts, and you would deck with garlands, sandalwood, and jewels, the food and provender of others. Look again, this heap of bones, inert and dead. Why? What are you so scared of? Why did you not fear it when it walked around? Just like a risen corpse propelled by some strange influence. You loved it once, when clothed and draped it was. Well, now it's naked. Why do you not want it? You said your need is no more there. But why did you embrace it, all bedecked and covered? From food, a single source come equally, the body's filth and nectar of the mouth. So why are you delighted by saliva and yet repelled by excrement? Taking no delight in pillows made of cotton soft to touch, you claim the human form emits no stench. Befooled by lust, its filth you do not recognize. Lustful one, befuddled by desire, because you cannot copulate with it, you angrily find fault with cotton, soft though it may be to touch. And if you have no love of filth, how can you cuddle on your lap a cage of bones tied fast with sinews, plastered over with mud of flesh? In fact, you're full of filth yourself. You wallow in it constantly. It is indeed just filth that you desire, and therefore long for other sacks of it.
Thought you were reading something out of Edgar Allan Poe.
Indeed. I will comment that after going through this and kind of shaking my head a bit, I thought to myself, well, Shantideva, in part, was talking to young monks and remembering to some degree that young men, probably from their late teens to maybe somewhere in their 30s or at least to their mid 20s or so, have trouble deciding which head they're going to think with. Perhaps this isn't such a bad way to help them turn away their lustful desires. But I have some other thoughts I'll share with you, but let me ask if you have any thoughts first. Okay. So, Shantideva here begins addressing sexual preoccupation. He talks about the two traditional antidotes to lust. In the first, using aversion, one can contemplate rotting corpses as an object of our lust. He asks us why we're so afraid of the same body when it's dead and decomposing if we think it's their body we desire. Why does everything change when the body is dead? In the second one, you contemplate the body's insubstantial dreamlike quality with no permanent or solid existence. On a basic level, first of all, Pima talks about the fact that circumstances can end desire and even lead to aversion towards the same person. Anyone who has been in an ongoing relationship knows that your sexual desire comes and goes depending on what's going on in that relationship. When we lust after somebody we don't know, it often depends on the very things we don't know. The source of sexual desire is not from the object of that desire, but emanates from each of us. Okay. The comments there's some more about these same things. In the next group of chapters, from 54 to 77, we'll read those, and then I have some very specific comments that I made about that. I thought it was about the first, but it's really from the next set. But it's the skin and flesh I love to touch and look upon. Then why do you not wish for flesh alone, inanimate and in its natural state? The mind that you perhaps desire, you cannot hold and look upon. Whatever you can hold and see is not the mind. Why copulate with something it is not? To fail to grasp the unclean nature of another's flesh is not perhaps so strange, but not to see the filthy nature of oneself is very strange indeed. Why does the mind, intent on filthiness, neglect the fresh young lotus blossom, opened in the sunlight of a cloudless sky, to take joy rather in a sack of dirt? And since you're disinclined to touch a place or object grimed with excrement, why do you wish to touch the body whence such excrement has come? And if you have no craving for impurity, why will you now embrace and kiss what comes from such an unclean place, engendered likewise from an unclean seed? The tiny fetid worms that come from filth, you have no love of them, and yet you're lusting for a human form, from filth arisen and replete with it. Toward your own impurity, disgust you do not feel, and yearning and a thirst for filth, you long for other seconds of it. Pleasant substances like camphor, rice, and fresh green herbs. Put them in your mouth and spit them out. The earth itself is fouled thereby. If still you doubt such filthiness, though it is very plain for all to see, go off into the charnel grounds, observe the fetid bodies here abandoned. When their skins are peeled away, you feel the horror and revulsion now that you have understood. How can you still take joy in such things? The scent that now perfumes the skin is sandalwood and nothing else. Yet how is it that one thing's fragrance causes you to long for something else? Is it not best to have no lust for something that by nature stinks? The worldly crave beside their purpose. Why do they anoint their flesh with pleasant scents? For if the scent is sandalwood, how can it be the perfume of the body? How is it that fragrance of a thing induces you to crave for something else? With lanky hair, with long nails overgrown, with dirty teeth all reeking with stink of slime, this body naked as it is untended, it is indeed a horror to behold. Why go to such excess to clean and polish what is but a weapon that will injure you, that cares that people squander on themselves in ignorance, convulse the universe with madness? When you saw the heaps of human bones, you felt revulsion in the charnel ground. And will you take delight in cities of the dead, frequented by such skeletons that live and move? What's more, possession of another's filth is not to be acquired free of charge. All is at a price, exhaustion in this life, and in the next, the suffering of hell. To gather riches, young boys are unable, and what can they enjoy when they're full grown? The whole life is spent gaining wealth, but then they're old and too old to satisfy their lust. If you don't understand that verse, that's a historical context to the fact that many young men had to work long time and indenture themselves in order to have a dowry. And therefore, by the time they were old enough to gain that much money, their lust had pretty much gone away. That's what that one means. Some are wretched in their desire, but worn out by their day-long work. They go home broken by fatigue to sleep the slumbers of a corpse. Some, wearied by their travels far from home, must suffer separation from their wives and children, whom they love and long to see. They do not meet with them for years on end. Some, ambitious for prosperity, not knowing how to get it, sell themselves. Happiness eludes their grasp, and pointlessly they live and labor for their masters. Some sell themselves, no longer free, in bondage, slavery to others, and destitute. Their wives give birth with only trees for shelter in the wild. Fools deceived by craving for a livelihood decide that they will make their fortune in the wars, though fearful for their lives and seeking gain in slavery they get. So Shantideva here again continues to talk to celibate monks and to address their libido. He's also basing his comments on an understanding of the body at his time, where the body was really considered dirty. The womb was considered dirty. Semen was considered dirty. Much of that is quite inaccurate physiologically and anatomically. The inside of our body, in fact, is sterile, including our urine. I had a mentor who used to joke that your urine is sterile, so you should wash your hands before you urinate, not after. So, but in fact, the other thing is we think of our GI tract perhaps as dirty, but our GI tract is not internal. It is in fact external. We have openings at both ends and a tunnel that goes through the middle of the body, and none of the bacteria or any of the nasty stuff gets into the body. That's the whole point of your GI tract. That, and of course, the absorption of all of your minerals and other nutrients. We now know that both the GI tract and skin as well contain a combination of bacteria and microscopic life that is not only not harmful, but necessary for life and health. We see our libido now as a normal part of life that is necessary for the preservation of humankind, and the pleasure of sexuality as a normal pleasure. It is one of the externals that we can seek happiness in, losing sight of its impermanence. As with everything else, the issue is how we use it. Do we use it as a form of control? Do we respect and the needs and desires of our partner, or do we see them as an object to satisfy our own? Has sexuality become an addiction? All of those things, I think, are much more reasonable ways to look at sexuality from our standpoint than to, for one, I don't know, maybe they still have charnel grounds in India, but we don't have those to contemplate anyhow. So, but as they tell us, we do need to contemplate death and what that means to us. Sexuality is one of those parts. And going back to what John was talking about initially, the way this describes it may not be very helpful to us, but it still makes the point that this is a place that many people can very easily get lost. And it's important that we see how we look at that striving and what it means to us and how we use it. So those are entirely my thoughts on that chapter outside a couple sentences from Pima at the beginning. Anything from anybody else?
I certainly have some thoughts.
Please.
I guess I'll begin just with a biological observation that we do have a natural response of disgust. And I think from an evolutionary standpoint, we can fully appreciate why that is so, because it gets triggered by things that could be very harmful to us, like rotten food. It's good that we feel naturally a disgust for that. But we, creatures of the 20th, 21st century, I think probably have a pretty good understanding by this point how people will use the ability to create a sense of disgust and be able to direct it where they want to direct it to. Think of, Jews, Muslims, blacks. You just go on and on and on. You can, and they create feelings of disgust, exactly what Shantideva is talking about here.
And women.
And women. And use terms like vermin, which has been bandied about by current occupants of the White House. vermin do promote disgust because they are potentially harmful. So anytime I'm just encouraging people that if somebody is trying to instill a reaction of disgust, I'd stop. Frankly, if I'd been teaching this class, I wouldn't have read through all this. I wouldn't have. I would have just summarized it. I would have made my point that I'm making now. Because it really is kind of, I respond with a sense of disgust to this use of disgust because I know it's harmful as I'm explaining. And actually, as John was reading this, the thing that came to my mind was the great Stephen King novel that was made into a really great film. Not all of this stuff was, but this one was Carrie. This is Carrie and her mom. So, I mean, please. But these are just my thoughts.
Well, it reminds me of Catholic school.
I'm glad I would have been going home. Mom, Dad, I'm out of here.
And the way confession was used, it was
Disgusting.
yeah.
Well, you were disgusting for your sins. Well, I won't mention the fact that I have in the past referred to this administration as vermin, but we'll go from there.
So,
Joe.
and clearly this is like a very broad brush approach to the term disgust, but if I get focused about it and say, okay, I will do that. I will picture somebody. It just happens to be the person I love more than anybody on this earth as laying there, rotting, decaying, falling away. Do I really feel disgust? The answer is no. No. I see the process going on.
Yeah. Well, and the one thing I would say to that too is, to a point at least, I think that's informed by our culture of understanding now versus theirs at that time. Not totally. I don't know. I don't know what they would have done, with seeing a loved one. Would they still feel that disgust? Maybe. I don't know. I'm very aware from many of the things and from reading the commentaries that so much of this is very rooted in the time of Shantideva.
In the 21-year-old guy monks.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I see your point there.
Yeah. And I chose to read these because I think they do. I was curious about people's reaction to them. I wanted to see what kind of conversation that this would bring about. So, all right.
We raise the issues of course, Catholic priests and where this kind of teaching ultimately leads to. Another thing we have a better understanding of now. So this is kind of not such a great teaching.
There is just a short little bit left to this chapter. And I think this departs from the charnel ground and rotting bodies. So let's read the last 9 verses here, and then we'll talk about that. The pain of naming, keeping, and losing all, seeing the endless hardships brought on us by property. For those distracted by their love of wealth, there is no chance for freedom from the sorrows of existence. They indeed, possessed of many wants, will suffer many troubles, all for very little. They're like the ox that pulls the cart and catches bits of grass along the way. For sake of such a paltry thing, which is not rare, which even beasts can find, tormented by their karma, they destroy this precious human life, so hard to find. All that we desire is sure to perish, on which account we fall to hellish pain. For what amounts to very little, we must suffer constant and exhausting weariness. With but a millionth part of such vexation, enlightenment itself could be attained. Those who crave are plagued far more than those engaged upon the path. Yet Buddhahood is not what they attain. Reflect upon the pains of hell and other evil states, weapons, fires, and poisons, yawning chasms, hostile foes. None is on the level with our cravings. So revolted by our lust and wanting, let us now rejoice in solitude, in places empty of all conflict and defilement, the peace and stillness of the forest. Happy those intent on others' good, who roam in pleasant places formed of massive stone, refreshed by moonlight's sandal-scented beams, by gentle woodland breezes soothed. In caves beneath the trees and houses left abandoned, may we linger long as we might wish, relinquishing the pain of guarding our possessions. Let us live in freedom, unconfined by cares. To have such liberty unmarred by cravings, loosed from every bond and tie, a life of such contentment and such pleasure, even Indra would be pressed to find. I think certainly if we use the idea of solitude that Dean presented to us earlier, the solitude of both action and quiet, and interpret his solitude in that way, this probably makes more sense. But he returns to the idea that pursuing wealth and family and fame, we can spend a lifetime pursuing them only to find they don't bring us any lasting happiness. And in addition, if we obtain any or all of them, we'll likely spend most of our time worrying about losing them. Pema tells us at this point, having less than enough to sustain our basic needs is definitely a cause for pain, but that it is rare for anyone, particularly in our culture, to be content with enough to meet our basic needs. Even if we were to get everything we want, the pleasures of samsara are fleeting, and our cravings are strengthened. Like a hungry ghost, we want more. He then tells us that with so much less effort that we put in those things, we can move forward on the Bodhisattva path, realizing how repeated samsaric patterns cause us pain. Shantideva again points us to solitude, not only to help us see these patterns and let go of them, but also as the door to contentment and freedom. I would also remind all of you what Stephen Wright said. You can't have everything. Where would you put it? So, anyhow, that's all I got. Any more thoughts? Anything to add to this? Okay. Then let's chant out. And unsurpassed, penetrating, and perfect. Sorry. Wrong.
May
Our intention equally penetrate every being and place with the true merit of Buddha's way. These are numberless. I vow to save them. Illusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. Buddha's way is unsurpassable. I vow to become it. Thanks for being here, everybody, and hopefully we'll see everybody on Thursday.